وسهلا بكل الذين ينضموا للاستماع إلى راديو بلدي أول راديو عربي أمريكي ويعنى بقضايا العرب في المهجر. برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا في بث حي ومباشر عبر WNZK راديو 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 until 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning, Michigan. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues.
Good day, everyone. Today, we will be discussing the earthquake in Turkey and Syria and how it is impacting relations in the region. First, relations between Turkey and Syria, and number two, between Arab countries and those two nations, how it is affecting refugees and how it is affecting the fight against ISIS, among other things. To do that, we have with us a group of distinguished guests and experts. We have Mr. Ammar Waqqaf. He is a member of the British Syrian Society. We have Dr. Tarek Abou-Ghazala. He is president of Kayla's list. We will find out more about his organization later on in the program. And we have Dr. Ghazoul, and she is a Syrian activist and academic researcher. We will be joined later in the program by Mr. Ömer Özkizilcik. I hope I'm getting his name correctly. He is a Turkish affairs analyst, but before we get started, I just want everybody to know that we are coming to you not just on radio, but also by video. If you go to the Facebook page of US Arab Radio, you will be able to see us through the application Zoom. And also, my first question will go to my three guests. And let's start with Dr. Ghazoul. First, the question is, what are the chances for cooperation and reconciliation between Presidents Assad and Erdogan now that they face the same tragic situation?
Good morning for you, for your guests, and for the audience, those who are watching us. Actually, I don't know why we are putting Assad at the same situation of Erdogan. I mean, Turkey has been damaged severely by the earthquake, but how about Assad? I mean, actually, the whole situation and the density of the earthquake was in the north and the northwest of Syria, in the areas that are outside of the control of the regime. And at the same time, the whole world witnessed that the regime didn't even allow opening the cross borders from its side. I mean, to allow for the entry of any aid, including the heavy equipment to be able to remove rubble and to save thousands of lives. So I don't understand in the first place why we are putting them in equal comparison. I think before the earthquake, Turkey pushed towards the normalization of the relationship with the regime. Maybe every country is responsible for its own decisions, and they care about its own benefits. And they find that, they have heavy burden because of the Syrian refugees. And they find at the same time that there is no hope in the political process, because as we know, it didn't advance even 1 millimeter because of the stubbornness of the regime, because of the refusal of application of any of the international legislations, including the weakest one, which is 224554, the Resolution Council. So, of course, I mean, Turkey started with these steps before. So I don't see that, the earthquake will impact on that unless Turkey is willing to do that. Thank you.
Okay, it's just that there were reports of efforts to arrange a meeting between Assad and Erdogan. It hasn't materialized, but I thought perhaps because of the tragic situation faced by both countries, maybe there would be more willingness to cooperate. Let me move on to
Please,
Dr.
just let me answer this part, because I believe that, Turkey has put some conditions that cannot be met by the Syrian regime. And at the same time, the Syrian regime put some conditions that cannot be met by the Turkish side, because this will eliminate the power of each party of them. For this reason, I mean, things stopped in its place. Additionally, I mean, you could hear that there are voices from the international community, from the US, warning anybody who would like to start normalizing the relationship with the regime without having any fruits. I mean, without advancing the political process that can bring this misery, this miserable story to an end, moving and ending with the transitional government.
Okay, let me move on to Dr. Abou-Ghazala. The same question, if you want me to repeat it, what are the chances for cooperation and perhaps reconciliation between Presidents Assad and Erdogan now that they face the same tragic situation? Go ahead.
I don't think that at this time such a chance coexists or exists, because Erdogan, from the moment the earthquake hit, we saw him mobilize his country, mobilize the international community. They declared the areas under level 4 emergency, which means we want international aid. We need international aid. And we saw things pouring into southern Turkey, into the earthquake area. What we saw, on the other hand, from the Syrian leadership, the regime leadership, we saw like total chaos. We saw smiles, visiting Aleppo, smiling, taking selfies with the people that have been struck. Not only that, Assad refused to call Halab Mankoube, means that it had been affected to the degree where the international community now legally can enter without the consent of the government.
Yes, but I think he also opened 3 crossings.
No, there was one crossing that was already open. The other 2 crossings where they said that we opened, they were already not under his control. So those crossings are not under his control. What they just said, they just sent a paper, a statement saying, yes, that we legalized the opening, and that was with the United Nations. There has been a legal statement, legal paper endorsed by numerous judges, the previous International Court of Justice, that you do not need the United Nations Security Council to open those, especially when something at this magnitude hits your population. I think those 2 leaders are not connected. Erdogan has been from the beginning already there on and overseeing the rescue efforts. He even apologized to his nations to the slow response. while we see the other leadership taking smile and selfies. So I don't think at this time that is on the like an urgent thing like we saw before the earthquake. Erdogan now is heading those efforts, and he also has elections coming up. Assad doesn't have elections. He's there forever. We know that, like from 50, 60 years ago, he's there forever. He's even preparing his son for the to take over after him. So that question, like, I don't think it's there. Turkey is very busy. Now, what we see in the northwest part, which, I mean, he started shelling 2 hours after the earthquake. We have reports 2 hours after the earthquake, they shelled areas in northwest Syria. And 2 days ago, they shelled areas in northwest Syria. So those are two different personalities. That's what I think.
Okay, Mr. Waqqaf, Ammar Waqqaf, what do you think about that?
If you allow me not to respond to a multitude of all small points and allegations, and if I may stick to your original question, I think that Turkey and Syria have been cooperating ever since Russia formally entered Syria in late 2015, and specifically and especially after the coup d'etat in Turkey in June 2016, whereby Erdogan sort of realized that cooperating with Moscow is much better than having them in his backyard. Ever since, we saw lots of movements on the ground covered by what we understand to be the Astana process. There has been the liberation of Aleppo, liberation or Syrian state regaining control of large swaths of the Syrian territory formerly under rebel control. This operation is still going. In the past few months, this process has been moving forward ever so quickly. There has been meetings, especially with the ministers of defense. Bar the earthquake and its aftermath, they might have been already meeting between the two foreign ministers and so on and so forth. What takes Erdogan more into, okay, so let me rephrase that. I think the main issue for Erdogan since 2015 or late 2015 was that the prospects of bringing down the Syrian states were not reasonable anymore. So the only move forward, the only path forward was to build up or rebuild trust with Damascus. And what we see right now is certain fruits of a very long process of about 6 or 7 years towards that effect. What we have at this moment in time is elections in Turkey. The Turkish population there has been tension over the past few years with the presence of a large number of Syrian refugees over there. This particular tension has been playing a part in Turkish politics. We saw that, for example, priority was given to Turkish people rather than Syrian people who reside in Turkey in the process of getting them out of the rubble of the earthquake and so on and so forth. And what we saw also is the head of the Turkish major party, CHP, Kılıçdaroğlu, sending a message to President Assad saying that they are more than willing to cooperate with Damascus in the future and share the good times and the bad times as the earthquake proved. So what we're seeing is that both sides of the spectrum of the political spectrum, in Turkey, willing to engage with Damascus because what they see is the long-term view that the Syrian state is there to stay and there is no point in continuing a meaningless struggle.
We're going to take a quick and a brief commercial break now, but when we come back, I will ask Dr. Ghazoul about the impact of the earthquake on the refugees or the displaced in the region after the break.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com. News that matters to you.
Are your hands feeling numb? Do you feel pain opening up a jar, turning a key? Are you noticing that your elbow and your shoulder are becoming stiff? Or were you recently injured in your arm? Hello, I'm Dr. Abou-Ghazala Katranji. And at the Katranji Hand Center, which just recently opened down the street from the Somerset Mall, we can provide you with the latest in hand, wrist, elbow, and shoulder care. Visit us at www.katranjihandcenter.com to learn the latest techniques that we have to offer you. And I look forward to taking care of you.
Visit us in Troy at 1565 West Big Beaver Road, Building F. Or call Katranji Hand Center for an appointment at 248-869-4263. That's 248-869-4263. Life is a nonprofit charity that's provided humanitarian aid and development to people and communities for over 25 years, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Please help improve these efforts. Make your tax-deductible donation to Life now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493.
I am Atef Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs, WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to our discussion on Radio Baladi. We are discussing the impact of the earthquake in Syria and Turkey on relation, not just between those two countries, but also in the region in general. My question now goes to Dr. Nahid Ghazoul. How will the refugees and those displaced in the area, how will they suffer even more because of the destruction?
Thank you for your question. Actually, let us return back to some of the statistics available up to date. And of course, the numbers are increasing. The number of the Syrian who died as a result of the earthquake just in north and northwest of Syria is 7,259, among which we have 2,153 children, 1,524 women. There are 2,534 out of the control of the regime areas, 394 at the regime areas, and at the moment there are documented 4,331 dead person in Turkey, and they are all Syrian. Of course, as everybody is seeing, now they are trying to get rid of rubble, including the bodies, and they throw everything in the sea. Some of the dead bodies are being buried without knowing who are those, because definitely the corpse distort after spending all this time under the rubble. The situation is catastrophical with all means, be it on the side of the regime or even to a higher level at the opponent areas, because they lack the infrastructure, because of the targeting, I mean, their buildings, their streets with missiles, with the barrels, with everything throughout the 12 years. So in the first place, it's a fragile infrastructure. They are under siege for more than 8 or 9 years. So they lack the basics. And because of the dire entry of the convoy of aid, this aggravates the scale of the tragedy, be it on the Turkish side for the Syrian, because the Turkish government is busy saving its people. And of course, this is understood. Syrians are mostly left alone. They are helping each other. We, as a community outside Syria and outside Turkey, we try to push with all our means to mobilize some fund to help in building tents, finding refugees for orphans, basically, because now we have hundreds of orphans, parentless, familyless, and at the same time, we are fighting on the political side with the international society that they shouldn't politicize aid, because unfortunately the UN politicized aid. And what we see from the delivery of aid to the regime area, and it was on TV, videotape, they are selling the aid doesn't reach even to the people who need it at the regime control area. So do you expect that they will deliver anything into the opponent area? Of course not. This is the situation, and we call for the help from any international humanitarian agency and all the agencies of the UN. If we take an example of similar case and the way they have treated the Syrian people, we will be shocked, because in 2015 and in the 25th of March, we can see that Nepal has been struck by an earthquake, and its magnitude was 7.8 degrees, exactly the same. But what happened, the UN mobilized 420 international agencies to non-governmental organizations and international federation, Red Cross, Red Crescent societies, to mobilize resources to the reprogram activities. But what happened in the Syrian case? UN was silent and ignored the disaster. So why is that? This is a big question that leaves us with really sorrow about the bias and bilateral standards that are being, the Syrian are being treated under, always.
Okay, we are joined now by Mr. Ömer Özkizilcik, and I apologize if I don't get it right, your name, Mr. Ömer. He is a Turkish affairs analyst. And can you hear me, Mr. Ömer? Can you hear me? Okay. Let me know when you hear me. Let me go to Dr. Abou-Ghazala now. Before I get you to answer my question, please, in 30 seconds, give us a brief idea about your organization, Dr. Abou-Ghazala.
Kayla's List Pack is a political action committee that works like any political action committee at educating the US legislators in the House and in the Senate about its cause, and our cause is a free and democratic Syria without dictatorship and despotism. It is part, and it's a founding member of the American Coalition for Syria, which is a 10-member organization that came together a year and a half ago with all the efforts towards that goal. All of us, we are specialized. There are 3 packs in the coalition. There are grassroots organizations in the coalition, and there are lobbying organizations in the coalition. We've been successful. Kayla was at the forefront in bringing the sanctions against the regimes, certain personalities against regimes, and that is the Caesar Act. And the Caesar Act, I just want to make a statement, does not include, the sanctions do not include any humanitarian, any relief, and any medical aid. The American Coalition for Syria was active from hour one. The first hour after the earthquake hit, we were able to communicate with the administration, and there was an $85 million release from US aid to Turkey and Syria, 50-50, and now there's another $100 million that has already been released as well. We worked, and there's a House resolution that was passed with the lobbying of the ACS so that the money is monitored, because we know that there is a General License 20 that was issued by the Treasury Department allowing monetary aid specifically to victims of the earthquake to go to Syria. So now the House resolution is to monitor that money, to make sure that that money does not get into the hands of the cronies of the regime, because this is something that has happened before under the auspices of the United Nations, under the supervision of the United Nations. So we want to make sure that the money reaches those in need in all Syria, in all areas affected by the earthquake, whether northwest, whether in Jable, in Latakia, all the way down to Damascus. If there's needy people, they will get the aid, and that's why we're working to do that. That's, in a nutshell, Kayla's list.
Okay, that was a lot more than 30 seconds, but thank you very much for the brief outline. What impact will the destruction have on the ability of the Kurds in the region to continue to fight ISIS?
So the way we look at that, ISIS has been defeated. That's been declared by 2 US presidents now, by President Trump when he was president, and by President Biden. So ISIS does not exist. Maybe there's a skirmish here and there. The Assad or Mossad, whoever controls the north east part of Syria, where all the riches are, work under the umbrella and the protection of the United States. And what we're trying to do, we're trying to say this area belongs to all Syrians, and that those riches need to be distributed equally to all Syrians in all the areas. We recognize that Syria is one Syria, so we do not recognize any partition of Syria in the American coalition for Syria. Now, there have been reports after the earthquake, if we're discussing the earthquake, that there have been convoys sent from northeast Syria, because it's a stable, peaceful area, towards the affected areas. Some of those have reached, some of those have not been able to reach due to the geopolitical situation on the ground. There's a crossroad, there's cross points, checkpoints, and they need to check if there's weapons or there's not weapons, maybe trying to reach pockets of the people there that are going to use them. So I don't think at this point that northeast Syria has contributed much to the earthquake disaster. I think there have been Syrian American organizations that have contributed immensely, like Syrian American Medical Society, the Syrian Forum, MedGlobal, the White Helmets have done a tremendous job. And this is with really no means of support by the United Nations. And they did a terrific job of getting the medical aid, the relief aid, trying to get people from under the rubble. Now imagine if those organizations had the support of the United Nations. It was only yesterday or the day before yesterday when the president of the World Health Organization went to northwest Syria and met with the Syrian American Medical Society. He chose the Syrian American Medical Society to host and show him the destruction. And that is because of the immense pressure that we put on the administration here to put on the United Nations, that the United Nations is not doing anything. All the United Nations wanted to do was just, okay, let's use this to alleviate the pressure that has been put on the regime for years, and that without any consideration to the affected people on the ground, whether in northwest Syria or in the regime affected areas.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I will be talking with Mr. Ömer Özkizilcik about the impact of the earthquake on the results of the upcoming election in Turkey after the break.
When you're looking for the best in optical care, Dr. Imad Nakash is your doctor to see. With years of experience and thousands of successful procedures performed, you can trust your eyes to Dr. Imad Nakash. See Dr. Imad Nakash and his professional staff for your eye care needs. There's 2 locations to serve you. In Hazel Park, call 248-336-3937. 248-336-3937. In Rochester Hills, call 248-299-3937. That's 248-299-3937.
Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bottom, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights. At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain.
I am Atef Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs, WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to our discussion on Radio Baladi. We are discussing the earthquake in Syria and Turkey and its impact on relations in the region. We have with us now Mr. Ömer Özkizilcik. He is a Turkish affairs analyst. And do you think, Mr. Ömer, that the earthquake will have negative effects on President Erdogan in the upcoming election in June, in Turkey, of course?
So first of all, let me start by saying my sincere condolence to all the victims of the earthquake, of over 45,000 in Turkey and approximately 6,000 victims in Syria. And this is an incredibly big catastrophe which shocked the region. And I personally am living in Ankara, the city in Turkey, which now hosts the most people who fled from the earthquake region in Turkey and tried to reach another city. And it is a catastrophe which affects every part of Turkey. It has shocked the Turkish society to its core. So usually one would expect that such an earthquake would have a negative impact on the ruling government and the ruling party. But unfortunately, or interestingly, as from the perspective you are looking at it, the Turkish domestic political landscape is quite complicated and not usual and very vivid living. So 24 hours in a Turkish political society is much more than 1 year in any European country, for example. So since the earthquake, we have seen several stages. And as of today, just before this radio show began, we have now new developments inside among the Turkish opposition. The coalition formed by the Turkish opposition collapsed as of today. So the Turkish opposition was not able to decide on one candidate for the Turkish presidency elections. And therefore, the second biggest party in the Turkish opposition coalition went out of the coalition and has called up the candidate of the Turkish opposition coalition, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, to be an ineffective and unwise candidate for the elections. So everything is quite vivid in the moment in Turkey now. And it is very difficult to guess who will win the elections and what the impact of the earthquake will be. So as a time in which the people are still not being, have not recovered from the effects of the earthquake, we see that the Turkish opposition is wrangling and wrestling on political positions and power plays. But the Turkish ruling party so far is engaged with the earthquake and with the recovery process and with the process of accommodating all of the needs in the region. So therefore, I think to see and understand the impact of the earthquake for the elections, we have to wait a little bit more to have some more objective data and some more polls being conducted by the Turkish research institutions. But as of today, it indicates that the earthquake will even more support and facilitate and strengthen the Turkish ruling party and the current Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, as the people who were affected by the earthquake and whose relatives were affected by the earthquake are now feeling that the Turkish opposition considers their power plays and their own political positions as more important than trying to help the earthquake victims.
Okay, I know you have to go in a few minutes, so I want to squeeze two more quick questions, but give me brief answers, please. Egypt and Saudi Arabia are among the Arab countries that gave aid to both Turkey and Syria. Do you think that will open the door for better relations between those countries?
So first of all, as of yesterday, my report about the effect of the earthquake in Syria was published, and the data is quite clear. Over 75% of all the victims are in opposition-held areas, and over 75% of all the buildings destroyed in Syria are also in opposition-held areas of Syria. Only less than a quarter of the destroyed buildings and the victims are in regime-held parts of Syria. But despite that, we see that the amount of aid received by the Assad regime so far is much more than the aid which reached the oppositional areas. And the aid came to the regime-held areas on the first day, while the first aid to opposition-held areas could only be delivered 3 days after the earthquake. So we see that so far the Assad regime has managed successfully to manipulate this earthquake for political and diplomatic gains. We have seen that the Assad regime has visited Oman, has received the Egyptian foreign minister and the Jordanian foreign minister and the Emirati foreign minister in Damascus. But when it comes to the Turkish position, we see that so far the Turkish government had an interest in speaking with Damascus, as there was a quite big domestic political pressure in Turkey to reconcile with the Assad regime, and the Turkish public believes that this somehow magically would facilitate the return of all Syrian refugees back to Syria, which is impossible to achieve. And as of now, with the earthquake, this is not as much of a priority as it was before. So therefore, I would argue that after the earthquake, the possibility of a Turkish rapprochement with the Assad regime is even less, far less than it was before. And even before, I did not give it much of a chance, as the realities on the ground were quite against any possible reconciliation between the Assad regime and the Turkish government.
My last question is, some say the earthquake came as a bonanza for President Erdogan in fighting or weakening the Kurds.
So when it comes to the Kurds in Turkey and in Syria, we see that the earthquake hit regions are predominantly areas which are not Kurdish. So in the 10 provinces which were hit by the earthquake inside Turkey, only one of them is predominantly Kurdish, namely Diyarbakir, and this province was hit relatively less. And in Syria, the only region which are Kurdish and hit by the earthquake is Afrin, and Afrin is already controlled by the Syrian interim government, the Turkish ally in Syria. And therefore, I do not expect that this earthquake would in any way or shape weaken the PKK-affiliated terrorist organizations in northeast Syria, or would not affect it will not affect the Kurds as a general population and demographics, as their areas, or the areas in which the Kurds are more and the majority, were not affected by the earthquake, except for Diyarbakir, which was relatively less affected. So therefore, all of these talks miss the geography and the demographic realities of Turkey and of Syria.
Thank you, Mr. Ömer Özkizilcik, for your contribution and for joining us. Mr. Waqqaf, how do you rate the quality and speed of the international aid?
To which area? With Turkey, we've seen a lot of aid coming through to Turkey proper. To Damascus, I have been impressed. It looks like the Arab states have been waiting for a chance or for an opportunity to declare open their intent to normalize relations with Damascus. And so we've seen a flood of, aid, airplanes landing every day in Damascus, in Aleppo, and Latakia. To the Syrian areas affected by the earthquake that are outside government territory, the first aid convoy was spotted 5 days after the earthquake by some media journalists. And it took so long time because I don't think the current government in Ankara, in Turkey, could afford to show its constituents or potential electorate that they are favoring the Syrian side rather than, taking care as much as possible to the Turkish side. So in a sense, we've seen international response. I have to here also point out that the sanctions were, I wouldn't say temporarily lifted, but there is a license now to send aid, to send money to Syria proper. This has been issued by the US government, which was welcomed. It, I would argue, facilitated matters a little bit. So in a sense, there has been some response, but to different areas and different, scale.
Now, we will discuss the American US sanctions in a minute. But Dr. Nahid Ghazoul, why was the media more focused on Turkey than on Syria, unless, of course, I am mistaken?
No, because maybe the scale of the tragedy in Turkey was enormous. And number two, because the country itself, the government of the country plays a very important role in mobilizing, this attention. But at the same time, I mean, from the regime side in Syria, so maybe they didn't want to announce that these are, badly affected area, or what we call it Mankuba, so the aid will not arrive to the areas by itself. So they wanted everything to be delivered through their agencies. Maybe this is one of the reasons. And because of the besiege and for a reason I don't know, the coalition from out of control of the regime areas didn't also announce such call. So yeah, the scale of the tragedy, being a country, independent country by itself, not torn out by conflict, there are many opinions about it, we can say so. But again, I mean, you could see that, many independent humanitarian agencies, media reflected on the Syrian crisis after the earthquake, especially in the north and northwest, when we saw people trying to dig the floor with their bare hands, using very basic elements to be able to rescue some of their families whose voices were heard for the second and third day without being able to do anything.
We will go to a break in a minute, but when we come back, I have a question for Dr. Tarek Abou-Ghazala, and I want him to comment on what Mr. Waqqaf has just said about relaxation in the intensity of the US sanctions on Syria, whether those sanctions are hampering rescue and recovery efforts in the region. After the break.
When it comes to reproductive medicine, IVF Michigan fertility centers are the recognized leaders. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 5 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. As a founding member of IVF Michigan Fertility Centers, Dr. Nicholas Shama is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. Dr. Shama has performed over 10,000 IVF cases and has helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. American board certified in both obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive endocrinology and infertility, Dr. Nicholas Shama is a very caring, compassionate, expert physician that understands not only the medical but also the emotional toil of infertility on his patients. When it's time, get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio. Call toll-free 855-952-9600, 855-952-9600.
Are you going to start a restaurant or a grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
Shots Mediterranean Market in Shish Kebab offers a great array of your favorite Mediterranean meals. Meals range from lamb specialties, shawarma sandwiches, and seafood dinners. Plus, they offer big trays of your favorite food and so much more. Kashat's Mediterranean Market in Shish Kebab is located at 32839 Northwestern Highway in Farmington Hills and is open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So stop in or call Kashat's today at 248-538-9552. That number again, 248-538-9552. Kashat's Mediterranean Market in Shish Kebab will definitely leave you satisfied.
I am Atef Gawad. Join me the first Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. I will be discussing some of the most important issues and events in the Middle East live on America's Voice of the Arabs. WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM.
Welcome back to our discussion on Radio Baladi. We are discussing the impact of the Syria-Turkey earthquake on relations in the region. Dr. Tarek Abou-Ghazala, do you think the US sanctions and the Caesar law and all the rest of it are hampering efforts to help the tragic situation?
The answer is no, because number one, the sanctions stipulate that relief efforts, medical efforts, and humanitarian efforts and aid is exempt from those sanctions. So, and that has been the case to start with from the beginning. That is in the Caesar's law, and that is in every sanction law. So in the United States, there is nothing that says sanctions do include humanitarian, medical, and relief. In fact, it states and stipulates that those are exempt. And that's why you saw the ability, for example, for SAMS and the Syrian Forum and the White Helmets to get in. Not only that, within the first 2-3 days after the earthquake hit, we were able to have Raed Saleh, the head of the White Helmets, which is now a world-class organization that helps in disaster areas to get people from under the rubble. Imagine what the Syrians have been able to accomplish under all those attacks by the Russian army and the Syrian regime's army. So we were able to put them in front of 40 officials, United States government officials. And after that meeting, the status of the White Helmets was increased so that now they are a main partner. They don't need a third party to be able to get aid to help them in their efforts. And $5 million were given to them to help them in their efforts. So in a short sentence, no, it does not. Now, however, remember, like in December, the president signed the NDAA and the NDAA bill, that there is the Captagon Act within that bill that states clearly that the Syrian government and Bashar al-Assad's government is included or dealing with Captagon. And now it gave the administration 6 months to go and look at that network of Captagon that has infested the area from Jordan to the Gulf areas to all over. And now it's creating a threat, national security threat at the United States. So when you have a president signing that, any government that wants to come and just normalize relations with the regime is gonna like take a step back and say, well, this is a Captagon government that deals with drugs. Am I going to be like, yeah, maybe now there's a GL20 license that will allow us to go ahead and send humanitarian aid, but if that aid doesn't make it to the right hands of those needy people and it ends up in the Captagon trade, what is going to be our situation? And we've heard that from Arab politicians and our Arab representatives of Arab governments. So the sanctions do not hamper humanitarian effort, but the sanctions will make people still like nervous about going ahead and sending aid, not because of the sanctions themselves, it's because of the regime's actions, the Captagon Act, the cronyism of the regime. We know, I'll give you an example about the sanctions. The regime said that in the first 24 to 48 hours after the earthquake, they said that Musfat Banyas, which is the refinery of oil in Banyas, stopped due to the earthquake. So that means they were refining oil, but the people were not seeing oil, they were not seeing diesel, they were not seeing kerosene. And they had to get like a message on their phones like every, like how long to get it. That's because that refined oil was going to Lebanon to support Hezbollah. Those are facts. Those are not allegations. Those are facts. So the regime, like in the first like 2 to 3 days after, sent out a few of those messages that tell you that they do have the money, but the money is used to shell the people. And we know that war costs a lot of money. They have the money for battle bombs. They have the money to get helicopters up and bomb and shell and rockets, but they don't have the money to give it to those who are in need. And now the American coalition of Syria, I'm telling you, we're working to get the money to those in need, regardless of where they are in any area of Syria, whether under the regime's control, whether under the Northwest control, under the Turkish control, and the South, in the Northeast, all parts of Syria. Syria is one, the people are one, and the aid should reach anybody who is in need.
Mr. Waqqaf, Ammar Waqqaf, do you have any comment?
Of course. I mean, I'm sorry I don't have as much time as the others had, but there are a few points to pick on. First of all, the sanctions, of course, they do hamper everything. If you go to Western Union and want to send money to Syria, you won't even see Syria on the drop list, despite the license that has been issued 4 weeks ago. You can't deal through banks, you can't do anything. All the license did was just being a gesture for some Arab countries that, yes, you can send some aid to Syria. But has any of those countries sent an oil tanker to Syria? No. Syria actually imports oil through Lebanon. If you go to Damascus and want to go up north, all along the Lebanese borders, you would see smuggled oil from Lebanon to Syria to fill up your car at ridiculous prices. So yeah, the sanctions are killing Syrians. It's doubtful that any of these sanctions is going to prevent a Syrian top official from buying a PlayStation to his kid. Yet all it's doing is to make normal people very hungry. Now, going back to the Turkish issue, I disagree with your Turkish guest. He left us, yes, but I truly think that the earthquake isn't doing harm at all to the Syrian-Turkish relations. What is happening is that this situation of the Syrian refugees in Turkey is pressurizing the Turkish government to have a rapprochement with Damascus, and the Turkish opposition are pushing or have been pushing that agenda and competing with the AKP government, and everybody is heading towards that direction. Again, there has been signals, the most recent of which CHP's letter to President Assad, that they are willing to do the same if they come in power. So that road is already paved, and what we're seeing and we will be seeing is more steps towards that direction. There have been many casualties in the Syrian government-controlled areas. The Syrian government, of course, is struggling to deal with the pressure. The aid has helped, but again, they lack lots of resources. It has been, 10 years or 12 years of sanctions. They cannot import anything. Anyway, with regards to the Syrians who live under militia control or rebel control, in a sense, they like to believe themselves to be a proper Syrian government, but the world doesn't distinguish between Abu Muhammad al-Julani and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. They had been brothers in arms. They swore allegiance to each other. And the fact that they are tolerating the rebels in the Idlib area and North Aleppo area, even though they have similar agenda to Daesh, that doesn't mean that they distinguish them from Daesh. They just want to weaken Damascus as much as possible. This is related to weakening Moscow and so on and so forth. But at a certain moment in time, these people are Al-Qaeda affiliated people, and the people of northern Syria outside government control will wake up to that. How will that affect all the refugees, whether inside that area or in Turkey, for example, or in Lebanon or in Jordan, heading back to Syria? We don't know. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I understand the situation, the refugees in Turkey will remain there as long as they believe that they can, or their struggle would be vindicated. The moment that they realize is that the Syrian state is there to stay, they will find a way and come back to Syria proper and, bury the hatchet and say, okay, because they will not be able to tolerate the hostility that we are seeing on a daily basis in Turkey. We see policeman brutality, security apparatus brutality against Syrians just because they, cross the road illegally or whatever. And there is a lot of pressure in Lebanon as well, in Jordan as well. And the only way this is going to end is for people to come back to Syria, no matter how long it took. The sanctions are hitting hard on every single Syrian family. A lot of change. I mean, unlike any of your other guests, I visit Syria regularly and see in my own eyes how people struggle. This is not how things would do. And people might look at the end of the matter and see all these glorious chances. We should pressure the regime, we should impose sanctions on the regime, and feel that they are on the wrong end at this, and they might decide to hold those who made all those chances responsible.
Now, I don't want you to feel you are getting less time than the other guests, so I have one more question for you, but please give me a brief answer. Syria has said aid will reach everybody, all victims, including those within the opposition. And you just talked about the opposition. Do you think that that is the case in reality?
So what happened was on day 2, there was a convoy that stopped at the Saraqib crossing between the government-controlled areas and those outside. The other side, being the Jabhat al-Nusra affiliated group, refused to allow entry. There is a lot of reasons, many reasons for this. One of them is that this is all related to the battle for the border crossings that has been raging in the UN Security Council for 2 or 3 years now. They don't want to make it easy for the international convoys to come to their areas through government-controlled areas, and that has made those convoys stop. Again, it took 5 days for the first convoy to reach through Turkey. And what has happened was that the UN reached out to Damascus, and Damascus said, okay, we understand that the United Nations have authorized only one crossing, which is Bab al-Hawa crossings. We have no legal issue if you would like to use as UN other crossing, 3 crossings for a period of 3 months. We won't object to that. So in a sense, the Syrian government, realizing that aid might not be going through its territory to the other side, issued a relief note of some sort to the United Nations to use other crossings, but it's doubtful that aid would reach those areas without consent of the Turkish government, who would definitely prioritize, in election time, definitely, who would prioritize its own citizens.
Okay, I have one last minute, and Dr. Nahid Ghazoul, within 45 seconds, I want you to tell me if you are satisfied with the level of the aid coming from Arab countries.
I don't understand why you are not allowing me to answer some of the political questions. I'm really not feeling satisfied at all. But I would like to return back to very important initial questions concerning weakening the courts. In fact, there is a confusion about, courts are part of the Syrian society. They are Syrians. We have the BKK, BYD, who are in the east, northeast part of Syria, and
okay,
we're hitting Syrians.
Dr. Nahid, I don't have much time. I apologize, okay. But I'm running out of time.
Okay, so your question, repeat please, sorry, your question, whether we are satisfied with the level?
Yes, the aid to Syria.
Of course not, because definitely the regime will not even provide the most affected areas with any kind of aid. Otherwise, why they didn't do that from the first days? And today, the Mrs. Barbara Woodward, the UK ambassador to the United Nations, mentioned one thing, that the Syrian regime contributes to spreading instability in the region through the illegal drug trade, which is worth tens of millions of dollars and financed luxury lifestyle of Assad regime. So why they don't spend this money on the luxury or providing the basics of life of Syrian people? Of course, the sanctions doesn't influence any of the humanitarian aid. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to see the planes landing at different Syrian airports under the control of the regime without being affected with the sanctions.
Okay,
so,
Dr. Nahid Ghazoul,
no.
I'm running out of time. Thank you very much. My thanks go also to Dr. Tarek Abou-Ghazala and to Mr. Ammar Waqqaf. And I will see everybody again with different guests the first Friday next month. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.